There's lots of NHL news and rumors to take a look at today. Today's trade rumors focus on teams like the Leafs, the Oilers, the Wild, the Blackhawks, and the Seattle Kraken. Plus, we have some comments that I found interesting from players like Kraken Montour and Jerard Debrusk in recent interviews they've conducted on some podcasts that will certainly confirm a few things regarding where they almost ended up and a little bit about their past here. Plus, we have hiring in Toronto, some ownership changes in St. Louis, some more signings as well, and a big update from Sheldon Kennedy, the Respect Group, endorsing Stan Bowman to return to the NHL. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots of NHL news and some rumors to take a look at here today. First, let's get started with news from the NHL waiver wire. Of course, yesterday we got word that the Carolina Hurricanes had placed Evgeny Kuznetsov on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination. Well, of course, today we found out that he cleared waivers. No surprise. We didn't expect anything else to happen there. So now that he's cleared waivers, the contract is officially terminated. So the Hurricanes and the Capitals, who both had a $3.9 million cap hit counting against their salary cap, has that voided off. Salary cap space now available. And as we mentioned yesterday, it's rumored and expected that Kuznetsov will be signing over in the KHL and is likely to sign a multi-year deal. So, like I said, his time in the NHL appears to be over. We do have some other signings here today as well. A couple of former NHLers signing overseas. Former Ottawa Senator, limited time Ottawa Senator Chartier has signed a one-year deal to go to the KHL. He will be playing for the team based in China, the Kunlun Red Star. Chartier was a player that really was at best a fourth-line center. Seemed to be a player that DJ Smith really liked when he was still coaching there in Ottawa. But really, he almost had like a small cult-like following around some of the Sens fan base. There's some that absolutely love this guy. I never really understood the hype. He was okay, but he a fringe NHLer at best. He played like 30-some games. There were times when DJ was coaching, he got like 15 minutes a night, which was shocking to me. At the end of the day, though, Chartier, hard-working player, not overly skilled, at least based on the NHL. I suspect the KHL will be a league that he will probably have more success in, but hopefully he does well. The Saskatchewan native, like I said, is very much a hard worker, well respected in that sense, but has been somebody who's had a couple of kicks at the NHL now in limited capacity and just really never really stuck. So Chartier heads to the KHL. Former Anaheim Duck Max Comtois is signing in the KHL as well. Now Comtois is a player who came out of junior and into the NHL with a little bit more fanfare behind him. Certainly had a little bit more of a, more success at the lower levels. He was at one point captain of Team Canada at the World Juniors. Comtois was a player that many thought would work out, and he's kind of bounced around a little bit as well in the last few years. Didn't really play a ton in the NHL this past year, and he's now signing in the KHL as well. So Comtois is still young enough that, depending on how things go over there, he could maybe make a return to the NHL someday if things progress for him. But certainly somebody I expected to do better than what he did. But at the end of the day, not all players work out. Of course, he's going to be signing with Moscow Dynamo over there on a, I believe it's a one-year deal, but I've seen the social media post. But of course, with the translation, it was hard to get it exactly 100% accurate, but we could make out that Comtois was signing there. That much we do know. And then we have another prospect signing as well from the 2024 draft. The Penguins have signed prospect defenseman Harrison Brunek, who gets his 3-year ELC. Of course, he was taken in the second round in the 24th draft, and he's the first player that's ever been selected in the NHL draft that was born in South Africa. Now, of course, he didn't really grow up there because he moved to Canada at age 2. I believe his family obviously had ties to Canada as well. Lived in Calgary ever since. So for the most part of his life, he was raised in Canada, but he is the first South African-born player to be drafted by an NHL club. We did get an announcement today as well concerning ownership in St. Louis. One of their owners, David Stewart, has sold his shares to be taken over now by Michael Riney. Now, of course, the team still remains to be 100% locally owned. There was also word from Dave Pagnotta, who reported that another NHL team as well is going to be having a bit of a change in their ownership structure as well. He didn't say who the team was going to be, but I guess we're expecting news sometime soon here on another franchise that seems to be selling. It might be a minority stake, but it sounds like it's a bigger chunk of a minority stake. So it could, could be 20, 30, 40%. It's hard to say, but do expect some news amongst ownership changes on another franchise, according to Pagnota, but he wouldn't really give us any other nuggets or tidbits on who that could be. So we'll have to stay tuned on that part. Now, as I mentioned as well, we had some news regarding Stan Bowman today. Sheldon Kennedy, of course, I'm sure most of you know who Sheldon Kennedy is. Of course, he himself was an abuse victim, one of the more high-profile cases that we've seen ever in the hockey world, in the world of junior. Former coach Graham James, who had several victims, including Kennedy. Of course, Kennedy went on to form the Respect Group, does a lot of work with a lot of different people and a lot of different industries, not only with victims, but helping people learn and deal with this stuff. And, of course, he went on to play in the NHL, but obviously had a lot of, there was a lot of things going on with Sheldon Kennedy that a lot of people didn't know until later, and he's had to do a lot of work on himself over the years as well. But he himself, through the Respect Group, put out a statement today endorsing Stan Bowman, saying that he was confident and comfortable seeing him return to the NHL, that he's put in the work and he's done lots to improve himself, and feels that after the whole situation involving Kyle Beach, where Bowman and a couple of his former co-workers in Joel Quenneville and Al McIsaac, of course, lost employment over this this scenario that unfolded, with them not taking proper steps to protect a player. And obviously the NHL had major issues with how things were handled in Chicago. We know that. But my original opinion was that these guys should never get a chance to work in the NHL again. I'm still not really sure that I fully agree with them getting another opportunity, but I do have a ton of respect for Sheldon Kennedy. And if Sheldon Kennedy is saying that he feels Bowman is, should get a chance to return, and he's done a lot of work, at least I will take and be able to, I guess, deal with it a little bit better coming from Sheldon Kennedy, knowing that he himself was involved with a lot of the work that Bowman has done to try to improve himself. But at the same time, still, you gotta wonder, these guys can all get other employment. They've all made, big incomes over the years. I'm sure they're not in the worst financial situation. Could they not get other jobs? It just seems to me that it might be best for everybody's sake for them to have employment elsewhere away from the NHL. But like I said, with the respect I have for Sheldon Kennedy and everything he's been through, if he's endorsing Bowman, I guess it helps me be a little bit easier with the fact of him maybe getting a chance to return. No word yet if Bowman is linked to any specific jobs. There was a point where he was rumored to be involved with the Edmonton Oilers, but of course at this point we can't confirm that, so we'll see. The Toronto Maple Leafs today also hired new director of amateur scouting. Of course, they recently had lost Wes Clark, who went on to join former Leaf Kyle Dubas in Pittsburgh. They've hired Mark Leach, who comes on from the Dallas Stars organization, where he worked there for 11 plus years in a similar type scouting role. And to me, this is a terrific hire for Toronto. To me, if you look at the Dallas Stars, they have been one of the best drafting teams in the last, say, 5-6 years without really having any kind of consistent or really even any high picks. They've done a super good job at getting their either later first rounder or even in the subsequent rounds, finding extremely good talent and getting these guys, like look at Logan Stankoven, look at Maverick Bourque, Wyatt Johnston. They were not high picks, but this is a team that has been competitive for a while. They do have, for a while, they were trending towards being an older team, and it could be a case where their window to be competitive and win was going to possibly close. But then in the last number of years here, they've been able to add a lot of talent. Now they did get like Miro Heiskanen was a higher pick. So when you get like top 4, 5, 6 picks, you do expect them to hit home runs and take great players that'll be impactful on the team. But they've done, they haven't had a lot of picks that high. And when they have had, like I said, there are other ones in the later first round or second round, third round, they've hit some real good home runs. Like obviously getting Jason Robertson, Ottinger, Heiskanen, Johnston. Then you throw in a guy like Maverick Bourque coming up next, Thomas Harley. They've done a phenomenal job. Heiskanen being the highest pick of all, but like a lot of these other guys were, later into the first round, second round. And to me, he had to play a big role in that. And I think the Leafs have hit a home run with this pick and Mark Leach. So it certainly can hurt for, obviously it's not all on him in Dallas, but he played a big role in it. And I think to help them pick up better players and with the later picks, because obviously they intend on being a competitive team that's not going to pick super high for a while, you need to be able to get those players to be able to keep turning things over and still add that younger player. The impact can come in, and every couple of years you have a new guy on an ELC that's impactful. It really helps your cap, really helps your team when it comes to having balance out the older players, the younger players that have that age. So you're kind of always sort of retooling a little bit on the fly with your own internal moves. It still allows you to have much more longer open competitive window. So like I said, to me, I think the Leafs did a phenomenal job here. So we'll see how that works out. A couple of comments from players that recently made appearances on podcasts. We talked about Shane Pinto yesterday and his comments that he made about the gambling suspension. Well, Brandon Montour recently did an interview as well and confirmed that he was almost a Toronto Maple Leaf. I know the Leaf fans especially were looking at social media comments and leading into free agency. A lot of people were hoping Brandon Montour could become a Leaf. And of course, his teammate Oliver Ekman-Larsson ended up there in Toronto, and Montour was close. They were very much in on Montour. Now, if they would have signed Montour, I would suspect that between the Chris Tanev signing and Oliver Ekman-Larsson, most likely one of those doesn't happen. But Montour didn't confirm, of course, any details on what kind of term or money that he was offered. Players don't usually say that, but he did indicate that the Leafs were very much in the mix. At the end of the day, he felt that the Seattle offer was what was absolute best for his family. Of course, like he had to not only think of himself, but wife, children, all that type of thing, and factored in all the off-ice stuff, and thought that the Seattle option was what was best for he and his family. But the Leafs were very much in the mix. So I know sometimes you hear fans wanting a certain player, hoping that they'll be able to come to their team in free agency. When it doesn't happen, sometimes you don't really know that your team really tried hard and were close, unless you get comments like this. So for Leaf fans to know that you're hoping that Brandon Montour was going to be on your team, Brad Treliving was very much interested as well. They were trying hard, they were close, but unfortunately we're kind of like a runners-up to the Kraken in that sense. Jake DeBrusk was also on the Cam and Strick podcast with Andy Strickland and Cam Jansen here in the last couple of days as well. And this is not exactly shocking news because we've heard the rumblings and the rumors, but this is the first time to hear it directly from the player, confirming that on 2 separate occasions during his tenure with the Boston Bruins that he did in fact ask for a trade. Now, one time we had heard, and I believe he basically had to kind of come out and confirm it because once it hit the media, it kind of spread. I know he was talking about how he had to address it with his teammates in the room, and obviously, and how a lot of the older teammates, leaders on the team, were really good to him and understood where he was coming from and kind of helped that situation kind of resolve itself and sort of be able to move on and continue with the team, even though people knew what he was looking at doing. I believe the second occasion came a little bit later than that, more recently. And of course, the Bruins never ended up moving him. So it's a shame, and from the asset management perspective, that they never really got to win another Stanley Cup. So using him as an own rental never really worked out. And at the end of the day, they could have moved him and got some assets back, because I really don't think Jake DeBrusk had any intention of re-signing in Boston. I'm not even sure that the Bruins really even tried very hard at all once free agency came around, because based on what we heard and what he said, sure sounds like there wasn't really much there. So I think they knew all along that getting into free agency that he was going to be gone. They missed their opportunity to trade him. And, just nice to know that some of the rumors that we've talked about and that we've heard over the last several months were indeed true. The Edmonton Oilers, a couple of news tidbits there. I've seen some rumblings. We've talked about a cost-cutting move likely coming to give some more cap flexibility going into the season. Many people feel that Ceci is the most likely, most obvious player that gets moved with 1 year left on his deal, just over $3 million. Again, not a given this happens, but it is something that seems very likely, makes a lot of sense. But the team that I've seen today that kind of been linked to Ceci is the Utah Hockey Club. Utah very well could be a landing spot for Ceci. He's got 1 year left. He's another veteran guy. Utah's trying to improve their club. Of course, we saw them already make other moves at the draft, especially bringing in Marino and Sergachev. They signed Sean Durzi to a very healthy contract extension. They could certainly, with looking at their depth chart with the blue line, I could see how maybe Ceci makes them a little bit better. He might have to play a smaller role like he does with maybe even less than Edmonton to a sense, but to have him as your third pair right shot D, really wouldn't be that bad for 1 year. In all honesty, I do think the odds of Ceci getting moved before the season starts is really good, and we'll obviously see what happens. But interesting to see Utah there. They may not be done tinkering with that blue line to kind of build a much more competitive team that the back end can help produce some of the offense, as well as be a lot better to defend. Of course, they have, somewhat decent goaltending as well. So be curious to see how much of an improvement they can make this year. And there's also another Edmonton Oilers rumor that says, and this came from a Oilers-based podcast called the 2 Months Podcast. According to their sources, because they've posted this to their social media pages, that they have sources that say that Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and Evan Bouchard are all willing to take team-friendly deals, or all willing to kind of leave a little bit of money on the table to help build a contending team at Edmonton to hopefully win multiple Stanley Cups in the next coming years during their next contracts. Now, of course, we know that the Oilers already came super close. By many people, including a lot of betting sites, they're considered already the favorites for next year, considering they were Game 7 losers of the Stanley Cup Final, so they were that close to winning this year. And they were able to they didn't really lose much of their team. They lost a couple of minor pieces, but they've also been able to add. So you can make an argument that the Oilers are, they might be as good or better, whereas Florida, who won the Stanley Cup, lost a lot of pieces. And I guess the general consensus there is they'll still be a good team next year, but a lot of people are not picking them to be quite as good. And at this point, are considered a little bit more of a long shot to repeat as Cup champions. So at the same time, you can understand how that would be a major motivation for these top Oilers players to want to stay. They saw tremendous growth, really close to getting a championship. And if they can put together an Oilers dynasty like some of the greats have in the past, back in the 80s, I think they'd be down with that. Now, of course, I can't verify who their sources are, but we will likely get an idea here soon enough. It's expected that the Oilers would like to work out a contract extension with Leon Draisaitl, who is the first here to kind of probably get this done, and then we'll see where that goes. I mean, it's possible, but not a given, that Draisaitl's contract does get extended sometime in the next few weeks here during the offseason, but it might be something that they put off until closer to training camp and maybe get done early in the season. But he's likely to be the first one of the bunch. It was already reported that Bouchard was going to wait, and he was going to wait and see what Draisaitl did. Of course, McDavid would be due this time next year, and kind of see where it is. But the three of them are definitely, they're having conversations. They're talking. They're all kind of wanting to play together, and obviously kind of see how this works out. We all know McDavid could have taken a little bit more money on his last contract, and he did shave off a little bit. So we'll see what happens. But for Oilers fans, that's great news. If it's true, can't verify that just yet, but we should get an idea soon enough once we get more speculation on the Draisaitl extension as they start to work on that, hopefully later into the summer here. Until some other rumors around the league, there is talk to Toronto Maple Leafs. We've talked about a few players that they'd be willing to move. We know that Nick Robertson would like a trade. I don't know if the Leafs want to do that. They may try to talk him into staying. Of course, we talked a bit about before how Timothy Liljegren's on the market and could be moved, even though he re-signed as a RFA this year. And now we also are hearing that David Kampf, it could very well be a cost-cutting move as well. I don't think a lot of the newer regime there in Toronto is as fond of that contract as the GM who signed at the time. Of course, that was Kyle Dubas. And I've seen some reports saying that Pittsburgh might actually be a destination for where Kampf could get moved to. A good example of how you don't really overpay fourth-line players. You don't give them a lot of term, and you don't give them that much money. Kampf is a decent bottom six defensive-minded center who can be okay on faceoffs, but you don't really get hardly any offense out of the guy. And the ones that get all the money in the NHL are the offensive players. That's just the way it is. You don't get paid big bucks for defense only. That's just, unfortunately for them, for those players, that's just the way it goes. So, this is, as soon as that contract was signed, I was like, okay, this is probably not going to go well. It's a very good contract for Kampf, but it's too much in my opinion, both in dollars and in terms. So we'll see if the Leafs do end up moving on from camp this offseason. The problem is he does have some term. But like I said, depends for a team. I've seen some people suggest maybe New Jersey. I don't know that, Sheldon Keefe, which we know, I think was fair to say based on how he utilized him in Toronto when he was coaching there, it's a player he likes. But I don't know, looking at the Devils roster, I don't really see how that would work for them and make sense for them. It would make more sense from a Penguins perspective. Again, not an absolute given, but it's going to depend on the price tag. But I think if they do move them, they're going to want something cheaper in return. So we'll see. There's a number of support players, you could say, or the depth around the top stars that are, still kind of movement here that we could see. It's less likely. I know we've talked about Marner. A few days ago, there was a rumor about Vegas making a blockbuster move, and maybe that happens. But at the same time, it's not a given. It's a lot more likely that we see some tinkering with the Leafs. So, guys like Liljegren, Kampf, Robertson, they're the more likely guys that could go. But we'll see where things go. Another goalie to watch that's still out there very much is Minnesota Wild goalie Philip Gustafsson. Again, at this point, probably less likely that Gustafsson goes in the short term. It could happen, but I wouldn't be shocked if a move like this maybe goes into the beginning of the season. Minnesota right now, it's hard to say what kind of team they're going to be next year. I'm not convinced they're going to be a playoff team, but they very well could be in the mix for the wild card. That wouldn't be huge, shocking news to me. Obviously, it's still early in the offseason, and there's going to be a little bit more moves here to come. Not a lot, but, I haven't really had time to analyze the full Western Conference. But at the same time, we know that this is not a move about them moving Gustafsson because they're not expected to compete or anything. They're expected to have Marc-Andre Fleury and, of course, Jesper Wallstedt. Now, Wallstedt is ready for NHL duty, which is why Gustafsson's trade talk has been around for so long. To me, it wouldn't be shocking if they start Wallstedt in the minors, and then as the season goes along, you're bound to get a team that's, maybe in trouble early with a goalie injury or something, and then maybe you see Gustafsson moved then. It could happen before then, but he's very much out there. And I'm not really sure. He hasn't really been linked to any specific teams in a while. Some of the teams that were looking at him before have kind of done other things and made other moves. So that's why I think at this point that the Gustafsson rumors, as much as there's lots of reports suggesting that he certainly is still available, but I think we're more likely to see that in training camp beginning of the season, once teams kind of reevaluate what they have or run into an injury or something of that nature. I also came across a rumor suggesting that the Blackhawks are very interested in Shea Wright of the Seattle Kraken. Now, again, I don't have any reason to think that Ronnie Francis and the Kraken want to move Shea Wright. I think they'd be very careful. They've been extremely careful with his development. He's finally getting a lot better. And to be honest, on how he played last year in the American Hockey League, and how he did play in a small sample size in the NHL, I can see why teams would be calling. A team like Chicago makes a lot of sense. I know Wright does have some history with Connor Bedard. He could be another centerman to add to their repertoire here as they build out this team and kind of rebuild a new young core in that city. And I can see why they would have interest. I believe that if they're going to make an offer for Wright, it would start with a player like Lucas Reichel being one of the main pieces, probably some picks in there, maybe a prospect defenseman. Something of that nature would be the offer. I don't think the Kraken bite, though. I don't think they're anywhere near ready to give up on Shea Wright. I think we're at least another season from that. Obviously, it's been a couple of years now since he's been drafted. Things have gone not to the point where that we were hoping for at this point, but you got to remember he missed an entire year of hockey because of COVID, and I really think that impacted him more than a lot of other players of the same age. Some of the other guys were able to go to Europe and play. He did not, and that might be coming back to haunt him right now. At least it slowed down his development considerably, but he's getting to a point now, if they play him in the right kind of role, I think he can be more successful. I wouldn't be shocked to see Shea Wright be one of the more fun, productive rookies in the NHL next year. I really think there's a good chance he starts the season at the NHL level and puts together a nice campaign. Might not be huge, but could he be, maybe a 40, 45-point player, maybe 20 goals, 20 assists type of thing, playing maybe a second line type of role? That to me is very doable. So to me, I don't think the Kraken trade Shea Wright. Not surprised to hear a team like the Blackhawks who are rebuilding would inquire. I just don't know, unless they're going to have to give up a lot more than Lucas Reichel and some picks to get the attention. I think the Kraken wait at least another year, maybe 2, before they give up on a player that was taken with such a high draft pick and has, still viewed by many to have a pretty decently high ceiling. So we'll see where that goes, but not shocked to hear his name out there in the rumor mill with teams inquiring at all. Let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.